Hi, I'm Miss Lavoti and welcome to my intro to the Tayasui Sketches Pro app for our digital brush painting project. In this lesson today, you're going to learn how to utilize the app to create different brush strokes using the Watercolor Brush, Calligraphy Brush, and the Dry Brush. This introduction is just simply for you to have time to play around with the app and see what the brushes can do for you. You will be submitting 3 different drawings that you do, just abstract mark making with the brush tools to show proof that you have played around with the tools, with the opacity, and tried the different effects that the tools offer. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is make sure you have correctly downloaded the Tayasui Sketches Pro app. So you're going to go into self-service and you can click the 3 dots in the corner to select your category that you want to search in. So you're going to go to art, and I need you to scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says Tayasui Sketches Pro. If you've already downloaded the regular Tayasui Sketches app, that's okay, but just make sure you have the Pro app because this is going to give us a lot more options to work with. And you'll notice that it has a black background with the pen being in white. So that's the one you want to download. I have it here on my iPad, so I'm going to tap it to open it up. So I'm clicking on the little page icon on the top here. It shows you what sketches we have already. So it's kind of cool in Tayasui. You can pick different sketchbooks to kind of work inside of, and this acts as your folder. So if I tap this in here, it shows you what things I've been working on already. And it gives me a blank page with a plus sign. So that is the page that I can work on as a new file. In the corner of that page, you'll see a little gear icon, and if you tap that, it allows you to select custom sizes. It allows you to select the grain of your paper. There's a lot of paper choices here for you. And then there's also color choices that you can pick for your paper as well. Just for right now, I'm going to just work in the native resolution, which is their letter size. If we want to tap letter 240 DPI, we can do that. And I'm going to select a watercolor paper. Since this project that we're doing with the brush painting is meant to mimic a brush painting, in real life we would be using inks, watercolors on watercolor paper. So on the app, I'm going to select watercolor paper as my grain. Then I'm going to click the blue check mark, which is going to bring me into the sketches screen. Okay, so just to identify a couple of things on the screen, on the left hand side you have different brushes and pens to pick from. In the project that we're working on, we're going to be focusing on the dry brush, the watercolor brush, and the calligraphy brush. So the dry brush, if I scroll down on the left hand side, it looks like this. It has the flat style bristle, and when you tap it, you're going to see several different icons underneath it. These relate to different types of brush strokes that the brush tool can make. So just for today, you're strictly going to play around with these brushes and just make marks on the surface of your new sketch paper. So without touching anything else, just the settings as is, I'm just going to tap the screen and drag a line out so we can see what this looks like. If I make the brush size a little bit bigger, you will notice that the brush looks a little different there. I can also zoom and pinch into my screen so we can see what it looks like even more. I can zoom out a little bit as well. If I tap that one more time and I click the square icon, I'm getting this much more dry looking brush stroke here. I'm going to change the size of it. With a light pressure or a harder pressure on the screen, it might impact the brush stroke that you see. So this is a really big brush stroke. This is me just tapping the screen. You'll notice on the right hand side the icons that I've been scaling. This is my brush size right here, so you can see the scale changing. And then the icon above it, that sliding scale above it where you see the checkerboard, that means that's your transparency. So that is your opacity scale. So the lower I get, the more see-through the brush stroke is. So if I were to keep it like that, I can make lots of opaque brush strokes. This is good to know because that's kind of how ink works in real life. Depending on how much water you have mixed with your ink, it's going to become more transparent. So that's the this brush here changes the brush stroke to a more pointed brush stroke. So you can see I'm dragging it out. It'll go from thin to thick, thin to thick. And then this one is going in the opposite way where I can create a thicker line and then make it more pointed at the end, so it trails off a little bit. Okay, to undo some brush strokes, in the upper left hand corner you will see an arrow pointing to the left. That is your undo button. You can also move forward or redo just by clicking the forward arrow pointing to the right. So I can undo some of those brush strokes. If I want to make a new sketchbook page for a different brush, I can. So what I would do is go here, tap this again. It's giving me the same exact settings paper-wise, and I'm just going to move down into the next brush that we use with this project, which is the Watercolor Brush tool. So this brush tool has a lot of options. It's probably one of the nicer brush tool features in Tayasui Sketches Pro. You'll see these different icons. As you work your way down, you're actually able to mimic adding water to your watercolor brush, which is kind of cool. So just to show you here, I'm gonna bring the brush size up a little bit more. I'm gonna keep my opacity at 100% to show you what this looks like. I'm just gonna start drawing. So because it's watercolor, it is pressure based and opacity based. So the harder I press on the screen and layer more, the darker that watercolor looks. But the softer I am pressing on the screen, the more opaque it'll look. So, I mean, the more transparent it'll look. So this is me bringing the opacity down even more and playing with the brush size even more. We can work our way down to other brushes. Notice this is giving me a pointed brush stroke on this end, so it's going from smaller and more narrow to wider. This one is a little more solid where I'm not getting so much of a point, but check out what happens when I bring it near something darker. It kind of blurs the edge a little bit, which is interesting. This one here is giving me, if I just tap the screen, it's giving me little watermarks in different sizes. And if I draw with it, I get a nice kind of fuzzy edge. It feels more like a wash. This one is a little bit more rounded. But same thing, if I tap the screen, just little taps, I get these different stamps of watercolor, which is pretty cool. And you can see that it really does a nice job of mimicking that watercolor edge that would happen if we were using the real media. This down here is actually a water droplet. So if I tap it, it almost acts as like a water eraser, but I can put this down and then I can go back and add color into it and it'll fade in and around, which is pretty cool. So this is the watercolor brush and the different effects you can play around with using that brush. And I'll make one final page for the calligraphy brush, which is this tool right here. It looks like an old-fashioned fountain pen. It has 3 different settings here. So the first setting is a rounded point, So I'm going to bring my point bristle up to a bigger size so you can see it here, keep the opacity at 100%. And it's almost like if I were to create my signature or, you know, create something that I'm really going to write with, which is kind of nice. It looks like an old school fountain pen. The edges are a little blurry. It has the ability to kind of make that bleed effect or that little hook at the end, which is nice. The biggest the brush gets is to this size and thickness, and you can play with the opacity and make it lighter and gray that way. This one here, let's see what that looks like. This is going to allow you to get a little bit of a larger line out of the deal. So that's kind of cool. And again, if I tap the screen, woo, I get these really cool ink blot effects, which I like. That's really kind of fun. It does a really nice job of mimicking ink in real life. And then lastly is this brush also does a traditional style calligraphy that gives you more of a flat brush. Okay, so this is something that we might not use too much in our Chinese brush painting project, but it is nice to know that this tool will mimic that calligraphy style as well. Now, in order to export any of these things and save them to your camera roll, you can select them and you can click the three dots and then click the up arrow, and this will allow you to save your image to your camera roll. So for each of the pages that you created, and to exit out, I'm just pinching the screen, by the way. For each of these images, you would want to go through and save them to your camera roll as proof that you have played around with each of these brush settings that we need for this project. So again, pinching the screen brings me back to my pages, the three dots, the up arrow, and that allows me to save my image. In our next tutorial, I will be going over how to recreate a Chinese brush painting of bamboo using the Tayasui Sketches Pro app. So that way we can achieve something like this image here through our app.